Today, we're going to talk about a quiet revolution that's been happening in our farm fields for decades. It's called Integrated Pest Management, or IPM for short. It's really a story about how we went from, well, waging an all-out chemical war on bugs to a much smarter, more strategic way of protecting our food. So where did this whole idea even come from?
Well, to really get why IPM is such a big deal, we have to start with a question that farmers and scientists started asking themselves way back in the middle of the 20th century. What happens when your miracle cure turns out to have some really serious side effects?
And that question leads us right into something called the pesticide paradox. You see, it was this era of incredible chemical breakthroughs that promised to solve an ancient problem. But, as it turns out, it came with a very modern and very tricky catch.
It all kicked off in 1939 with the discovery of DDT's insect-killing power. I mean, it was a game changer. So through the 40s and 50s, these new synthetic chemicals were adopted just about everywhere. It felt like we'd finally found a silver bullet. But by the 60s and 70s, some serious alarm bells started to go off.
And this right here really gets to the heart of the problem. On one hand, the promise was amazing. Just spray and get rid of pests, which meant bigger harvests. Simple. But the reality? Whoa, it was way more complicated. The very pests we were trying to kill started evolving resistance. And at the same time, we were accidentally wiping out helpful insects, like the bees that pollinate our crops. That miracle solution was actually creating a super dangerous feedback loop. So, faced with this massive paradox, scientists and farmers realized they needed a totally new game plan. And that new plan was to stop thinking like a chemist with a spray can and start thinking like an ecologist. And this is the philosophy they developed. This definition from way back in 1967 is so important because it marks a complete shift in thinking. Look at the language here. All suitable techniques and maintain pest populations. The goal was no longer to just kill everything, which, let's be honest, we learned was impossible anyway. It was now about smart management, keeping pests below a level where they actually start costing the farmer money.
I love this analogy because it makes the whole concept just click. Think of an IPM farmer as a doctor for their own little ecosystem. They're not just handing out the most powerful drugs for every little sniffle. No, it's about proactive health. You observe, you use preventative care, and you only pull out the heavy-duty tools, like pesticides, when it's absolutely necessary. It's a last resort, not the first choice.
Okay, but that raises the million-dollar question, right? If you're not just spraying on a schedule, how in the world do you know when it's actually time to do something? Well, the answer isn't guesswork. It's all about knowing your numbers.
And this is where a super important concept comes in, the economic threshold level, or ETL. You can think of it as a data-driven alarm bell. For instance, a farmer might know from research that if they find, say, more than 5 specific caterpillars on a corn plant, the money they'll lose from crop damage is officially greater than what it costs to treat the problem. That's the threshold. That's the trigger point. It turns a gut feeling into a calculated economic decision.
So, once that alarm bell rings, what do? Well, IPM opens up this incredible toolbox that goes way beyond just a chemical spray. It's this whole arsenal of smart and often nature-inspired tactics. One of the coolest tools is biological control, basically using a pest's natural enemies against it. This can mean releasing predators like ladybugs or tiny wasps that lay their eggs inside the pest. Kind of gruesome, but effective. Or you can even use specific germs, bacteria or viruses that only make certain pests sick. So instead of spraying a chemical, you're literally restoring the natural balance of the ecosystem. You're letting nature do the work.
Another really smart strategy is to make the plant its own bodyguard. Through careful breeding, we can develop crop varieties that have their own built-in defenses. We're talking about things like fuzzy leaves that pests can't chew on or waxy coatings they can't pierce through. Some plants even produce natural compounds that just make them taste bad to bugs. Then you've got the sterile insect technique, which is, and I'm not kidding, basically a form of genetic birth control for pests. It's genius. Scientists raise millions of male insects in a lab, they sterilize them with a bit of radiation, and then they release them out into the wild. These sterile males go out and mate with the wild females. But no baby insects are produced. The eggs never hatch. Over time, the whole pest population just crashes. It's an unbelievably clever way to control a specific pest without any chemicals.
And the toolbox just keeps going. IPM also uses pheromones. Those are the chemical signals insects use to talk to each other, to either lure pests into traps or to just confuse the males so they can't find a mate. And all of this is combined with good old-fashioned smart farming, like rotating your crops to break pest cycles and managing your water supply to make the fields less friendly to pests.
Now, this kind of ecosystem-based thinking, it doesn't just stop at the farm gate. It actually scales all the way up to the global level, creating this huge international defense system to protect the world's food supply.
And the very first line of that defense is something called plant quarantine. Now, this is way more than just a sign at the airport. It's a complex, global system of rules designed to stop invasive pests from hitching a ride on a shipping container or in someone's luggage and then completely devastating a new environment.
So how do countries decide what to watch out for? They use a scientific process called pest risk analysis, or PRA. It's a really logical three-stage process. First, they identify a potential threat. Second, they assess the real risk. How likely is it to get in? And if it does, how bad would it be? And third, based on that, they figure out the best way to manage that risk.
And the guiding principle behind this entire global system, which comes from the International Plant Protection Convention, is all about balance. The goal isn't to just block trade for no reason, it's to make sure that any restriction is based on solid science and makes economic sense. It's about protecting agriculture while still letting global commerce flow as safely as possible.
Okay, so after all of this theory, what's the real-world result? Does this smarter, more integrated approach to farming actually work? Well, let me tell you, the evidence is pretty overwhelming.
The numbers really do speak for themselves. Look at India. IPM helped cotton farmers slash their insecticide use by almost 3/4. Rice farmers cut their pesticide use in half. And then check out the Philippines. It wasn't just about cutting costs for them. Farmers using IPM actually got 62% higher yields. This data shows that IPM isn't just some nice environmental idea, it's a powerful economic engine.
So what this all boils down to is that what's good for the planet is actually good for the farmer's wallet. It's not a conflict. By cutting down on expensive chemicals and improving crop yields, IPM builds a food system that's more profitable, more secure, and way more resilient. It's a genuine win-win.
And that leaves us with one final and really critical question. We know this works, we have the science, we have the tools. So in a world that's facing a changing climate and a population that just keeps growing, the big challenge now is this. How do we take integrated pest management from being a best practice to being the standard, everyday practice absolutely everywhere?